What did Ice Age humans actually do when it got dark? When it got dark in the Ice Age, fire did more than keep humans alive. It built everything we are. You'd assume they huddled in fear until sunrise. So why does the evidence say the dark was actually the safest, busiest part of their day? What we know, from organized hearth circles to sleep studies to firelit cave art experiments, is the night was where language, trust, and art began, one fire at a time. Picture the scene. It's the last ice age, the temperature has dropped far below freezing. The sun is gone, and the dark belongs to everything that hunts at night. A small band of humans has one tool that changes the terms completely, and that's fire. But building a fire wasn't the whole story, because what matters is what they built around it. At Dolní Věstonice, a Gravettian site in what is now the Czech Republic dating to roughly 26,000 years ago, archaeologists found something that doesn't get enough attention. The people there constructed a fence of mammoth bones to mark a clear boundary between inside and outside. And at the center of that enclosure sat a large bonfire, with huts grouped together within the barrier. Most of the figurines at the site were found clustered around that central fire pit. That isn't random camping. That's organized, defended, fire-centered space. The same pattern shows up at shelter sites like Abri-Pacteau in France, where researchers documented organized hearths across multiple layers of occupation spanning thousands of years. Same circle, different place, different millennium, same behavior. When you hold the open-air evidence next to the shelter evidence, the same basic idea keeps showing up across thousands of years and hundreds of miles. The bone fence created an inside where the group was protected, and the fire held the center of it all. But the circle wasn't just about keeping warm, because the fire did two jobs at once, pushing the dark back and giving people a reason to sit together for hours, with nothing else demanding their attention. Therefore, it was the stage, the protected space where everything else could happen. Once the predators were held at the edge of the light, the people inside had something they almost never had during the day, which is hours of safety with nowhere to go. That combination, safety plus time, is where the whole story starts. Someone still had to stay awake. Who was watching is the first clue to what happened next. Reminding to subscribe without breaking pace. If this is blowing your mind so far, hit subscribe now so you don't miss what's still coming. The obvious assumption is that everyone simply slept until morning. But the evidence from modern hunter-gatherers says something different, and it's remarkably specific because researchers have actually measured what happens when a group sleeps through the night with no artificial light. In 2017, researchers led by David Sampson published a study in Proceedings of the Royal Society B that tracked the sleep of 33 adults in a Hadza community in northern Tanzania. The Hadza are modern hunter-gatherers who live in groups of 20 to 30, sleep on the ground, and use no artificial light, which makes them the closest available analog to how our ancestors slept. Each adult wore a small wrist device that recorded movement for 20 days straight. The result reframes how you think about the night. Out of more than 220 hours of observation, all the adults were sound asleep at the same time for only 18 minutes. On average, more than a third of the group was alert or dozing lightly at any given moment. The Hadza don't even post sentinels to keep watch, because their natural variation in sleep patterns is enough to ensure someone is always on guard. The age pattern adds another layer. The older members of the group tended to go to bed earlier and wake earlier, while the younger ones stayed up later and slept later into the morning. Researchers call this the poorly sleeping grandparent hypothesis, the idea that restless sleep in older people isn't a disorder, but an evolutionary leftover that kept mixed-age groups safe through the night. Inside the defended circle, the group was never fully unconscious at once, and that's where trust begins. because someone always had your back while you slept. But the Hadza are alive today, not fossils from the Ice Age, so no one can prove ancestral humans slept exactly this way. Therefore, look at why it would happen at all. Mixed age groups of any prey species benefit when sleep is staggered rather than synchronized, because synchronized sleep means the whole group is blind to danger at the same moment. The Hadza pattern isn't a modern coincidence, it's what evolutionary theory predicts should happen, which is what makes it the strongest evidence we have for what the night probably looked like. If someone was always awake, the real question is what they did with those hours. That's where survival turns into culture. The awake hours weren't wasted because what happened by firelight is where culture got built. Polly Wiesner, an anthropologist who spent 40 years studying the Juhoansi Bushmen of the Kalahari, released a study in 2014 that compared what people talked about during the day versus at night. She analyzed 174 conversations and 68 firelight stories from camps in Botswana and Namibia, and the split she found is sharp enough to reframe what the night was actually for. During the day, 34% of conversations were complaints, criticism, and gossip. 31% were economic matters like hunting and food, and only 6% were stories. But at night, by firelight, 81% of the talk was stories, and only 7% was complaints or gossip. Night stories covered hunts, marriages, disputes, myths, and the spirit world, and there was singing, dancing, and trance healing mixed in. Wiesner called stories and gifts the original social media. But this is a living analog, not a fossil record of Paleolithic storytelling, and Wiesner herself says, we can't tell about the past from the Bushmen. Therefore, we read it as inference, the closest available parallel to how hunter-gatherers use firelit time, and it's consistent with what fire's extended day would predict. When fire bought people hours together with nothing to do but talk, those hours became the space where language, myth, and shared meaning consolidated. Trust built the sleep. Story built the culture. But the circle was above ground, and some people carried fire somewhere it had no business going, deep underground. Everything so far happened above ground, but some Ice Age people carried fire into the one place it was even more necessary, which is deep inside caves. At Chauvet, a cave in the Ardèche region of France dating to roughly 32,000 years ago, some of the best preserved figurative art ever found, sits far from the entrance in total darkness. Every single image was made and viewed by fire, because there was no other light. The connection to the fireside circle is physical, not just poetic. Researchers studying firelit plaquettes at the site of Montestruc found that torch lighting at Chauvet produces rubefaction traces on the limestone, the same heat discoloration signature found on engraved stones placed next to hearths above ground. In 2021, experimental archaeologists reported in PLOS One on recreating Paleolithic cave lighting, testing torches, grease lamps, and fireplaces to understand how people moved and worked in the dark. But some cave art was made with steady lamplight, not flickering torches, so the firelight connection doesn't apply to every image on every wall. Therefore, we narrow the claim to torchlit contexts where rubefaction and flicker are present, which is where the animation effect actually happens. The choice to go deep underground with only fire to see by is itself evidence that firelit visual experience was deliberate and valued, not an accident. Same fire circle now carried into total darkness. What that firelight did to the art on the walls is the last piece. This is the last link in the chain, and it's where everything connects. In 2022, researchers led by Andrew Needham published a study in PLOS One on 50 limestone plaquettes from Montestruc, a Magdalenian rock shelter in southern France, roughly 13,000 to 15,000 years old, now curated in the British Museum. The plaquettes carry 76 animal engravings, mostly horses, and many of the animals are superimposed on top of each other. The first clue is physical. 27 of the 54 plaquettes show heat damage, pink discoloration, cracking, and thermal fractures, and the researchers ran 5 experiments to figure out why. They tested whether the marks came from functional uses like boiling stones or oven furniture, and they checked whether the pattern matched placement near a hearth instead. The plaquettes' heating pattern matched the hearth placement, not the functional uses. But the real finding is what happened when they placed the plaquettes near a fire in low light. The roving firelight made the engraved forms appear dynamic and alive, and in a virtual reality simulation of one plaquette, the flickering light drew focus to one horse and then another, giving the impression the figures were moving across the surface. Human vision is built to read shifting light and shadow as movement, and pareidolia, the tendency to see recognizable forms and random patterns, gets stronger when light is scarce. Magdalenian people were visual experts in animal forms, which made this effect hit harder. But the researchers stress their results are only indicative, given the limited context from a 19th century excavation, and the intentionality of the animation is interpretation, not proof. Therefore, we present the hard evidence that heating patterns match hearth placement and firelight demonstrably animates the engravings, and we label the first cinema framing as the researchers' reading, an earned interpretation rather than a settled fact. The chain is complete. Trust, story, art. The first cinema wasn't a projector. It was a fire and a stone in a dark room. They didn't hide from the night, they used it. By firelight, they built trust, language, myth, and art, the things that made us human, one fire at a time. If this made you think differently about the ancient world, subscribe, and there's a whole channel of stories like this one waiting for you.